Many of us have been watching the events unfold in the Middle East for over a month now. And so I thought it would be relevant for us to look at the state of Israel birth chart to get an idea of what kind of energies could be unfolding in the present and also what we can see in the near future. As many of you know, with the Vedic astrology, we can look at individual birth charts, but we can also look at birth charts of countries, corporations, and all types of different organizations as long as we have a birth time and we have a date of birth. So that's what we're going to be looking at today, just to get a better understanding of what kind of karma is there. If you're new to my channel, make sure you like and subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can get all of my updates and videos. If you're interested in a personal private reading, check for details down below. I am running a special discount for the month of November. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the chart for the state of Israel. And Israel's less than 120 years old. So the Vimshatari Dasha is going to be relevant. When they do the Vimshatari Dasha, it's assumed that, the average human lifespan will be under 120 years. So from the time you're born till the time you pass on, you're always in one of these Vimshatari Dasha periods. So the whole Dasha cycle is 120 years. So it makes it really relevant. I usually don't look at the Vimshatari Dasha if a country's over 120 years. I just look at the transits. Okay, so what I did notice was before everything started unfolding in early October, it's interesting that Israel had just entered a new planetary period in the beginning of 2023. So in February of 2023, Israel entered Rahu Mahadasha. And that's a really big change. Whenever you enter a new Mahadasha, it's a huge change. And a lot of times you don't see the effects of that change until 6 months to a year after you enter that change. The reason being is there's overlapping energies between Mahadasha periods. So when you enter a new Mahadasha, you're kind of in that center zone where some of the old energies of the preceding planetary period are still kind of there. And it takes a little while to really fully embody the energies of the new planetary period. That's called Dasha Sandy, by the way. So Rahu in the chart of the state of Israel is in a very volatile position. We're going to take a look at that right now. It's in the eighth house of Aries. And so the eighth house has to do with extreme volatility. It has to do with secrets, sudden and shocking events. So when things started happening in the first week of October, there, when the tragedy happened, it was during this eighth house period. And remember, the eighth house is one of the evil houses in Vedic astrology, just like the sixth house is. So the sixth house, the eighth house, and the 12th house are all considered the Dashtana houses. Although the 12th house is a little bit lower of an octave than the sixth house and the eighth house. So the eighth house is active during this period, and it will be active for the next 17, 18 years that state of Israel's in this Rahu period. So this is definitely a very volatile energy. Also, you have to keep in mind, eighth house is the house of death and rebirth. There's a lot of transformation that can take place during this period. So, for example, you could see a change in the cabinet, or you could see a change in, there's been some calls, I think, recently for the prime minister to resign. So you may see some sort of sudden changes with that. Okay, because eighth house represents transformation and sudden changes that take place. Now, because of the volatility of the eighth house, we're still, or the state of Israel still not out of the woods with these events happening. So it would be like one of those things where if I was advising them as a client, I would say, well, you're in a very volatile period. There definitely could be some, sudden and shocking events in the near future here, just because of Rahu being in the eighth house. So definitely there's a sense of instability, not stability. It's quite the opposite. What happened, what I noticed what happened was during the first week of October, when everything, when the tragedy happened, was transiting Rahu was in the eighth house, and it was going backwards into the seventh house of Pisces. And this, remember, it entered Pisces on October 30th. But when it's in that zone, like 3 degrees of a fire sign, which is Aries, and 3 degrees of a water sign, which is Pisces, it's called Gandanta. And Gandanta can be a very treacherous time, a very treacherous zone. And so that's when all of this took place, was during this treacherous zone and when Rahu was going through. Keep in mind, when you're in a Rahu period, Rahu is even more strengthened. Transiting Rahu is even stronger than it would normally be if you were in another planetary period. So say you were in a Jupiter period or in a Venus period, transiting Rahu and Ketu are still going to be relevant, but it's going to be even stronger, double to triple stronger if you're in a Rahu Bhukti or Rahu Mahadasha. So that's what's going on there. So it's really strong right now. Rahu's in the seventh house. So, there is this idea of trying to find balance. I mean, we're in the very early stages of the transit, but I do find some difficulties with finding the balance right away. Let's talk about where Saturn is, because this is very relevant. Saturn is in the sixth house of Aquarius, and this can be a very difficult transit in anybody's chart. So on November 3rd, Saturn went direct after being retrograde for several months. You might have remembered that. And so it's very powerful because it was just retrograde and then it just went direct. So it's like the energy is very powerful right now. The sixth house represents problems, conflict, warfare. It can represent really difficult um, subject matter. And what I found quite surprising is that there's the sixth house being activated and the eighth house being activated. So these are both really known as the evil houses, like I said earlier. So this is a very difficult period right now. Now, Saturn is the planet, wherever it's transiting in your chart, what happens is Saturn has a mandate to really burn off the karma in whatever house it's transiting. So in the sixth house, the karma that it's dealing with while it's in the sixth house, and this would be, for the state of Israel, but even if you're a Virgo ascendant, this would be the same for you, any of you that are a Virgo. There's this karma of dealing with enemies. There's this karma of imbalance. There's this karma of conflict. And what Saturn's trying to do is Saturn is trying to manage the conflict, or Saturn's trying to bring it under control, but it doesn't necessarily make it go away. See, what Saturn does is Saturn just tries to manage it. Saturn's just trying to control it, but it doesn't necessarily mean the conflict is coming to an end. Usually you see the resolution to a sixth house transit when Saturn enters the seventh house, is when you see usually some sort of resolution to whatever imbalance is brought up. So that's not going to happen till March of 2025. So what's likely, what I see is with the Saturn going through the sixth house, it does look like it's going to be a longer conflict than maybe anyone realizes. I mean, it's going to be going through the sixth house all of 2024. And I think that a lot of the leadership has indicated that it was going to be a longer, drawn out thing. So that's what I feel like. There might not be a resolution right away. There might be kind of like this, just trying to maintain this things at a level where it doesn't get worse. That's what Saturn's trying to do. Saturn's trying to keep things at a certain level where things don't get worse. But this is the big but in all of this, is with the Rahu in the eighth house, Rahu can cross any defense. So even a Saturn defense, Rahu will find whatever weak point is in that defense, and Rahu can find a way to make things difficult. So that Rahu element is like it's like the Tower card. It's just this very volatile element. Even though Saturn's trying to maintain this stability with Rahu, Rahu can be very sudden events that happen that come out of nowhere. You didn't see it coming. So I'm a little bit worried about the conflict worsening in some sort of ways just because of this Rahu and Saturn. I mean, Saturn, what it's doing is bringing up a lot of the heavy karmas. And what Saturn does is Saturn is bringing up issues that were unresolved from the past. So that's what usually what's happening with Saturn going through the sixth house in anyone's chart, really. It's bringing up some sort of unresolved situations and karma. So it's trying to bring it resolution. But while you're trying to, find some sort of resolution, there's sixth house represents you're in the middle of the problems that are happening at the moment. So this is a very difficult period. I do not feel like we're going to see this end right away. So if people think that uh everything's going to go back to normal very soon, I don't see that in the chart, and I don't feel like it's been indicated either. One thing to point out too is, well, Rahu goes through the seventh house of Pisces. K2 is going to be going through the first house of K2. I mean, K2 is going to be going through the first house of Virgo. And remember, the first house represents your identity. So we could see some sort of, and with the eighth house, we could see some sort of change in leadership within the government there because of K2 going through the first house. So there definitely could be a lot of sudden changes that happen in this chart. It's a very difficult chart. And I'm correlating this with the USA chart. Because the USA chart, if you remember, USA is going through something called Sati Sati, where transiting Saturn is going right over the natal moon in the USA chart. And it's going to be at peak strength on November 15th, basically the whole month of November. So this is a very intense time for the world. But I still feel like we're not out of the woods with this at all. So there's a lot of volatile energies. And I just wanted to give all of you an update on what astrology has to say about it. And of course, my interpretation and speculation. But anyways, let me know what you think down below. Try to be respectful to each other's opinions. Thank you so much. And I will be definitely trying to, find any more charts relevant to the world situation. And also, I will be also taking a look at more charts for royal family and celebrities. So thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.